Hey, Carl. Hey, Cinder, if you're on the line with us, I'm going to promote you to panelist. So just go ahead and accept that, and you'll be pulled into the main meeting here.
Your sound is way off, Chris.
Is it bad? Okay, hold on.
Try now.
Is it any better?
Yeah, it is.
Is it better now?
Hold on a second.
Still not good?
Oh, there you go. You're
Oh,
good.
okay, great. Yeah, sometimes my webcam / mic just needs a little help.
Okay.
Good afternoon, Cinder.
Hi there.
Hi, Cinder.
Hi. Hmm.
Right, just waiting on Mike and Dave. That's good.
I think Abby would be joining from Hilltop also still.
I think I see Abby there as well.
I see Dave.
I did get an error message when I was promoting panelists, so looks like we got everybody.
I was wondering, I'm like, he kept asking me, and I'm like, I guess I'm not allowed.
And then sometimes I'm like, I wonder if they got it, so I try it again. I wonder if I'm just, pulling it back too fast. So
Yeah, so when I first logged in, I was just part of the webinar.
yeah,
So
For some reason my video won't turn on. I'm here.
How you feeling, Cam?
A lot better than I was in the last couple of days, Dave. I'm still not 100%, but I'm a lot better than I have been.
Well, we'll take that.
Yeah,
you did not
I
sound
will
very well
too.
the last time we spoke.
Right. It's very strange that it won't start video.
Between Chris's mic and Cam's video, I mean, it's time to call Dell. I think it's
always something with technology.
so should I call the meeting to order?
I think we have everybody.
We're good to go.
All right, so Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to a special working meeting or single subject meeting of the Board of Selectmen on June the 2nd, 2025. Before I begin, I will take a roll call vote of the members of the board. Robin Hunter, present.
Dave Haviland, present.
Pam Hudson present.
And then I guess the first item of business is public comment. Is that correct?
Yeah, we include that just because we usually do. I don't
Okay.
know if anybody's here, but
There's nobody here.
yeah, okay.
All right, so then we're gonna move into our guests of honor. Thank you very much, Hilltop, for attending this meeting. I think Mike had given you a set of questions that we had ahead of time. You know, the premise of this meeting is really for us as a Board of Selectmen to learn from you, the subject matter experts. You know, this is the first time in a very long time that Dover is in a position whereby we have to really bond a lot of our capital. Over the past 10 years, we've been doing it by utilizing free cash. So today we really want to talk about best practices. And you know, understand what the rating agencies are looking for so that we can begin to formulate a Dover specific policy.
And know our optionality as we go forward. I mean, that's the biggest thing. We don't know what the right thing to do is and what we're I'm gonna just say allowed to do without causing eyebrows to raise.
Right. And I guess for us, most importantly, we don't want to inadvertently do something that's going to hurt us in the long run. So you know, we're also have a consultant who we're going to work with as we think strategically about capital and how to better forecast for that. But we also need to make sure that we're including the bonding in our overall forecast so that we really understand, you know, what our financial commitment is. And all along as a board, what we've really tried to do for the town is to try and not have spikes in the tax rate caused by capital. So we're trying to smooth the tax rate as best as we can.
Robin, is it worth mentioning what our schedule looks like for this year and the next two?
Yeah, so over the next 3 years, we have about 4 years, we have approximately $14 million in capital that is being requested. You know, whether or not that will be spent over the next 4 years or whether it will get pushed out, you know, we're not certain, but it does create a big spike. And from a corporate finance perspective, you know, when I think about this, and I think Dave thinks about it similarly, you know, what we're thinking about is trying to match the debt term to the useful life of a particular project. And it's unclear to us that is acceptable, or whether or not that is the best practice, because within that 14.5 million, there are going to be trucks that are being replaced that may only have a 5-year useful life. There'll be larger vehicles like fire trucks that may have a 10 to 15. And then there'll be infrastructure projects that may have anywhere up to a 20 million useful life. And some of these amounts can be less than $1 million and some of them can be more. And so we're struggling with, you know, again, what we really want to do is avoid spikes in the tax rate. And of course, if you're, you know, if you're maximizing your debt useful life, that somewhat helps it. but we don't know if that makes sense because we're going to have some very small, we may have a $1 million bond for 20 years, and maybe that isn't something that's marketable. We just don't know. Maybe we're better off waiting and grouping things together. So we're really trying to understand what our options are so we can think about this strategically.
Well, you're asking a lot of good questions, and those are the questions that we always hope to give you feedback on. You're not going to get in trouble if you structure and issue debt in accordance with the useful life index. The rating agencies would never think that was taking some kind of an undue risk or pushing debt out too far. And a lot of issuers, especially the larger the project, do exactly that. On a large school construction project, a lot of issuers are trying to sell that over the, maybe 20 or 30-year term. It can go out for 30 years. Most debt in Massachusetts can go out as far as 30 years. But the interest rates, so we're always driven by the useful life. That's how the law works. Every project is originally structured based on its useful life. So, recreation, 15 years, equipment, you have to certify as to the useful life. It could be anywhere from 5 to 20. And usually construction and land acquisition is up to 30 years. Only certain kinds of water projects can go longer than that. And anything going longer than that, and even going as far as 30 years these days, is self-defeating because it doesn't save that much on a budgetary basis, and it costs a tremendous additional amount of interest cost to take it out beyond 25, or even in some cases beyond 20 years. So we look at different options all the time, and I think that's what you got with some options that we'd been looking at for a while after having various discussions with your administration for you to consider. And we can talk about that in a minute. You asked whether or not, so no eyebrows will be raised with regard to how you might structure the debt. Best practices to stay within the useful life of a project. Part of the problem with some of these longer term projects is that, for example, a 30-year project, you issue debt for 30 years and you might find that in 20 years you're replacing the roof. So you have to give that some consideration as to whether or not you're going to need to have repairs along the way. And if you can shorten it up and you want to for that reason, or if you can afford to shorten it up and pay it back sooner. I think one of your questions was how quickly might the rating agencies look at your debt metrics to consider whether or not you're amortizing, paying back the debt fast enough from their perspective. They like to see 50% of the principal paid back in 10 years, generally. But that doesn't mean, and they've got other metrics that they look at: debt as a percent of the full value of property in the town, debt as a percent of the budget. You can violate some of those. In fact, when you're developing fiscal policies, we would recommend you use some ranges, but you can violate the ranges a little bit depending upon what's going on in the market. If rates are 2% for 30-year debt, you should probably violate the metric and issue as much debt as you can at that rate. And it would be better than, and not worry about whether or not you're meeting arbitrage rules. We tend to look at whether or not in this rate environment, which we still view as pretty good, you could borrow, some of this debt at 10 years, you could probably borrow that at under 3.5, and 20-year debt right now, you could, and this would be front loaded if you were looking at 20-year debt, it would be 3.75 or better. So market rates are pretty good. We do not have a crystal ball. Our philosophy with regard to giving advice is to consider what's in the best interest of the town. Now, if you've got as much as 14 million more debt that you're thinking, and our other philosophy is to keep all your options open until you have to make a decision. We're
Hey, we
driven
agree on that.
Well, we're driven by when you need cash for the project. So we want to get you the cash you need, whether it's short-term cash or long-term bonds, short-term notes or long-term bonds. Notes can be renewed for 10 years, but you have to start paying down principal as if you'd sold bonds by year 3 and again by year 4. And it gets kind of messy if you've started to leave bands out for a long time for no good reason. And there are some reasons we do it here and there. One is to amass enough debt so that a bond issue is of significant size, so that the cost of issuance is efficient. You know, we usually don't do very many $1 million bond issues, and when we do, they don't usually go out 20 years, but that could be done. But right now, you were looking at basically a what is it, $3.2 million bond issue. That is, we're doing those a lot. Our company basically issues about 300 300 issues a year, probably 100 bonds and 200 notes. Maybe it could flip-flop depending upon what's going on with the market. We represent 150 towns in the state and probably most of the cities. So we're giving them all advice on how to structure debt. I can tell you that if you're thinking of issuing up to 14 million in the next 3 to 4 years, you don't have to think that that has to necessarily tie with what you're doing right now. We've been talking about what you're thinking about bonding now for the last 3 years. I think it's been a long time we've been talking about this. So if you get out to where you're, you know, it might take you 3 or 4 more years to figure out what you're doing with the others. You're going to have to evaluate those projects, look at different options, consider your cash flow requirements for those projects. And so you know, it could be that one option I would throw out, only because you're so far down the road with this, interest rates are good. A bird in the hand is worth, you know, 2 in the bush. If you like where rates are, to take advantage of that, that's what is going on in the marketplace right now. The market already has built into it the expectation that the Feds will probably cut twice this calendar year. So it's not like you have to wait for the Feds to cut in order to get that advantage. That advantage is in the current marketplace. But when you get around to the next 14 million and you're looking at your capital plan with more intensity, because I understand you're looking at the Collins Center to assist in developing a formal capital plan, you could look at all the options you've got for that. And at the same time, you'll be considering whether or not any or some of that should be debt excluded. You really have to look at debt excluded debt differently than your debt that's subject to the lower levy limit of Prop 2.5. That is what we've done with the information that we provided. We've shown you the existing debt that's subject to the lower levy limit of Prop 2.5, general fund debt, and the same with the debt, what's existing. And then we added on a couple different options with regard to the structure of this $3 million. And before we get into that, I would just like to point out, you could turn on a dime right now and sell notes if you really felt that that's what you wanted to do. Note rates are about the same as bond rates right now, 20-year bond rates. You probably get the same for a note. I'd say, like, let's just say a 1-year note, maybe 3.5. It would not be rated at this size. $3 million normally doesn't warrant getting a rate, paying the cost of the rating. It doesn't give you that advantage on the sale of it. So if you got 3.5 on a 1-year note, you probably could get, you know, like I said, 3.5 on the 20-year bond structure. Because the 20-year bond structure, only part of it is going out right now anyway, is going out to 19 years. I think that if you wanted to have each purpose of the bond go out the maximum term, and we're showing you doing some of that. We're showing you taking the debt out, some mixed. So when you've got 7 different purposes of projects inside what is currently be considered for a bond issue, each one has been separately structured. Some of it originally, when we structured it, we went for 5 years only because we wanted to see it. They were small amounts, and some of it for 10 years. On the paperwork we provided, that's the left green column is a mixture of 5 and 10-year structure. Then we were asked by the town to make it all 10 years. So that's the middle column of information. And you can see how it provides some budgetary relief in each year. It's the far right column within each box. And it costs an extra $70,000 in interest to make it all 10 years instead of 5 and 10 years. And you can see that difference right down below. And it's the same, the right column that's green and the left column that's green, and inside each box is the difference between principal and interest. The left column is your existing debt, and you can see not a lot of it falls off. It doesn't leave room for a lot of additional debt to come on while that's outstanding. And you can see what the bond structure would look like for this issue of debt in column B within each box of the green. The far right, we were asked to take everything out for 15 years. And you can see versus the 5 and 10-year hybrid, that doing that costs an extra $238,000 over the 15-year life of that bond. But the 15-year life, you can see it cuts in the far right column of each box. The first box, $713,000, the first year principal and interest, it would cut it down to $550,000. So that's, a $225,000, $215,000 difference in year one. And it's that you can see going down, it declines a little bit each year, but it does provide budgetary relief when you go out longer. We did the same thing down below with your debt excluded portion of bonds, which is for the Carroll Community Center. That was originally authorized as a debt exclusion. We originally, since it's only $780,000 that you've got designated for additional cost that you need for that project, we originally structured it for 10 years. And then we were asked to show it for 15 years. And you can see the difference there. It's not that great a difference over the life of the loan. The 15 years, it's only an extra $75,000 to go out 15 years versus 10. And it's barely any, it's a $20,000 budgetary savings in starting in the year one and working its way down a little bit each year as you pay off principal. So those were basically what we originally showed the town, probably just a 5 and 10-year hybrid on top in the 10 years as food for thought to get a reaction. And now we're hearing that you've got another 14 million you might be considering down the road. Our initial feedback that we like to get from the town is when you look at your existing debt up top on this page, and you can see in the column A, it's the same column A is the same in each box. That's how your current general fund debt pays off in terms of principal and interest payments each year. 267,000 working its way down to 189,000 in 2035. It's only $2,060,000 of debt. It's not a lot in terms of what's falling off. Certainly not enough to take on 14 million of new debt if there were no debt exclusion. And even this issue isn't. If you thought you're bringing on, on the 14 million, one thing to think about right now as to whether or not you wanted to do bonds or notes. And I would say that if we get back to the idea of whether or not you like where rates are at to sell a bond. A lot of issuers do. We probably got, the only reason why we're seeing a lot of notes right now is because issuers can't afford to issue debt bonds before June 30 and have a principal and 2 interest payments in fiscal 26. So they're issuing notes to the fall, and then they're selling, hoping rates don't go up, and they plan to issue bonds then to permanently finance the notes. But that way they can leapfrog over fiscal 26 because they've got a hard time balancing fiscal 26 given what's gone on with, primarily tariffs and the whole discussion of tariffs and prices going up and the uncertainty. So if the 14 million that you're considering right now, if a lot of it would be a debt exclusion or a lot of it is one project that would be debt excluded, there's a different set of considerations that you might want to think about. You don't have to issue debt equal principal.
Yeah, so if I could, do you mind if I just back up a little bit? Because this has been so helpful, but for a neophyte like myself, it's like been drinking from a fire hose. So I feel
that's fine.
I just missed about 90% of it. Would it be possible to go through the list of questions just so we get some baseline? Because when you're talking with lots of variables, and it's the variables that we really want to understand as a group so that when we have our internal discussions and come to you, we know what we're talking about versus literally groping in the dark. So the first question that I have has to do with costs. And on a very rough, what is the cost of a bond issue versus what is the cost of a ban issue?
Bond issue is more expensive because the advice that's rendered can have a larger impact than on a bond than on a note. Your bond is out for 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And bad advice would end up resulting in higher, maybe the wrong structure or higher yields on the bonds. The biggest cost of issue on a bond issue is the interest rate. So I think a lot of issuers get hung up on the cost to get the bond issued as opposed to the real cost is the interest rate. So, but I'll tell you, the cost of issue include us, bond counsel to render a legal opinion, the rating agency to give a rating. This is for a bond issue. And the printing company to basically the cost of distributing, printing the disclosure document. And then the purchaser, whatever their underwriting expense is, and then the yield. So the purchaser gets compensated when they buy the bonds in order to distribute the bonds in the secondary market. And then the yield on the bonds is what the investor gets when they buy the bond. So you've got all those costs. The yield and the purchaser's compensation, people don't usually think about that, but it's basically all reflected in the net interest rate at which you're borrowing. On it, the regular cost of issue are probably anywhere, I can tell you what our fees are. Our base fees run from $15,000 to $25,000 on a bond, plus $1.50 per thousand issued. Bond counsel is about the same. They render an opinion as to the tax exempt status of the bonds, and they also render an opinion that the bonds were properly authorized and that authority to issue the debt can't be challenged.
Okay,
So, and then the rating agency is another major is the other major expense. They're probably up to half of what us or bond counsel are charging, depending upon the size of the issue. The
So
larger
can you
the issue,
repeat
the
what
more
the-
that they charge the same. Sorry, go ahead.
Can you repeat your fees and bond counsel fees?
Well, I can't speak to bond counsel's fees. I can
Okay.
tell you that adds to about the same as our fee. Our fee is
Okay.
$15,000 to $25,000 as a base fee. And then $1.50 per $1,000 of
Okay.
debt issue.
So is it so you said between 15 and 25, so
Right.
what kind
What-
of
what
bond
dictates that?
issuance is 15 and what kind is 25?
Most of them, if we're doing debt modeling, end up between $20,000 and $25,000 base.
Okay.
It depends upon the number of projects. I mean, I don't want to tell you so much.
I won't hold you to any of these fees. What I'm trying to understand is
Yeah, no,
there's
you can hold it to
fixed-
our,
So it seems to me there's fixed costs associated with any permanent bond issue. And then there's variable, and what I call variable are costs directly associated with the size of the issuance, right?
most of the fixed costs are based on the size of the issue.
As well. So, but I'm not, there's base fixed costs and then there's fixed costs associated with the size of the issuance. So regardless, right? Because I'm going to pay 150 on $1 million bond and then 10 times that if I have a $10 million bond.
If you have $1 million bond, you would pay $1,500 plus probably a $20,000 base fee.
Right.
So it would be about $23,000.
Right. So what I'm trying to figure, I guess what I'm trying to say is there's a base fee that I'm calling a fixed cost in a sense. That
is the base fee.
right.
Okay.
And then there's the amount that's tied, the fee that's tied directly to the size of the issuance. So if you have $1 million issuance, it's going to be less than a $10 million issuance.
1,000 versus 10,000.
Right.
Right.
Okay, so
some of the bond issues that we work on have 150 projects. Those would have a $25,000 base fee. Some of them have 10 projects, but it's extremely complicated what's going on with each project. So
that's
it's
a
extremely
25.
time consuming.
Right.
Well, it could. A lot of them are $25,000 base fee. I can tell you that a lot of issuers start thinking about the cost of issue, and they're thinking that the fees for bond counsel, financial advisor, the rating agency, that those are the big costs because it sounds so big. I'm trying to explain that the biggest cost is the interest rate on the bonds. And the biggest component of the interest rate is the yield to investors. So you might borrow at 4% and the yield to investors is 3.5%. And the rest is what the purchaser gets. But the 3.5% is what the investors get for buying the bonds that go out 20 years. That 3.5% far outweighs, you know, 0.5% of the par amount of the bonds as being the cost of issue that you're looking at.
True, but if we may, we're back down to the education part, and
Yep, that's fine.
we're trying to figure out, like, what is a general cost when we talk about a bonding? What is the general cost? Because as we're talking about now, we have 3 million on the table now. We could have as much as 14 additional. We don't know what
Yeah.
the future is going to bring. That could grow, that could shrink. We don't know. Interest rates are a variable that none of us can control. We
Right.
can try and think that we're the smartest people in the room and try and bottom tick the rates. But what we're after is, before we even consider that, we need to understand the components that go into it, so we can make that intelligent decision. So the first one is, what is the cost of a ban if we were to ban this for a year or
The
two?
ban is basically $5,000 base fee plus $1 per thousand. So bans are cheaper.
And well, legal is probably because it's less for them to do, and then the rating agency doesn't have to weigh in. And if the rating
Well-
agency is roughly 50% of your fee and
No,
legal.
no. The rating agency fees are different and bond counsel fees are different on a note. Bond counsel does just as much work on a note. Their fee is about the same as ours. And then the rating agency, we normally wouldn't get a note rated unless it was about $7 million size. It depends on the market whether or not a note would be rated or not rated. And, you know, the uncertainty and volatility in the market, maybe we would get a rating on as small as a $5 million note issue. The rating agency fee, the minimum is usually around $5,000 or $6,000 that they charge to rate a note, a small note.
Is there a similar number that you can put on the rating for a bond? Even a range?
The ratings on bonds are based on 10 million versus over 25 million versus over 50 million. So their standard fee on a bond is probably, you know, on a bond, I don't know, 20,000.
Again, I
mean-
thank you. These are order of magnitude numbers, not to hold anyone to, but rather to
Right.
educate us. So
Well,
when
and
we
just
talk
to-
about going out to market and meeting our capital needs, now we know that a bond is significantly more expensive than a ban. And
Right.
it may make sense to take a bunch of smaller projects, ban them. We understand interest rate's the great variable, but if you can tell me what interest rates are going to do between now and next year, I'm all ears, but no one knows. So,
Right. Well,
Well, you are
Yep.
though gonna have
so
some double fees, because if you do a ban, there are fees associated with the ban. They are significantly less than a bond, but you are gonna have those additional fees.
agreed. You
right,
got to
there's
pay
a
them
lot of
twice.
issuers that
Right.
issue bans and roll them every year for 5 years and then they sell a bond. Just so you know, the ban, the cost of issue can be forced as a premium to be paid by the purchaser to the issuer so that you can pay the cost of issue out of the interest rate. So that's an option. You don't have to appropriate it. You don't even have to appropriate it after you get it from the purchaser. You can pay it by state law directly, but you also don't have to budget an appropriation to pay cost of issue on either notes or bonds. Generally, very small note, a $50,000 note couldn't produce a premium, but
No, but again, the concepts now we can all, you know,
Right.
grapple with. We understand. So thank you. Along those lines, one of the other questions I had, the amortization, and you started to speak about that with a regular amortizations, which I'm referring to like a mortgage or level principal, or upfront principal. And I was wondering if you could speak to that in terms of how you choose to do the principal.
Well, we don't really choose it. We talk with the issuer to find out what the issuer thinks they want. And then we show it to them. And if they think that that's high up front, we would show them either hybrid structure with some level debt service, like a mortgage up front, and then revert back to equal principal. Or we would show them just level debt service on a large project or a debt excluded project where it might make more sense. It does cost more money to structure it like a mortgage because you're paying off the principal slower. You know, a lot of the issuers like equal principal on larger projects because if it's not a debt exclusion, debt service declines from year to year, opening up room for more debt service to be added inside the lower levy limit of Prop 2.5. And a lot of issuers like level debt service like a mortgage if it's debt excluded so that everyone can pay their fair share of that project cost over the
Right,
life
but
of the loan.
Before we go there, though, could we go back and I'm sorry, my simple little brain wants to tackle one concept at a time.
That's
And
fine.
with amortization, so we have the choice on the type of amortization we're going to do. Does that have any
Definitely.
effect on the bond rating or what Moody's is
No.
going to see?
Not really. We issue every type of structure.
So that's quote an open decision based on our ability to repay.
Yes, and your goals.
And did I hear you correctly, the market as well? It could be more expensive if you did sort of a traditional
If
mortgage
you go
type.
out, the longer you go out in certain markets where the yields are much higher and where investors want more competent, they don't even want these 30-year bonds. I mean, right now we're in a market where investors would prefer not to go past year 20. They will for a price, and that would be the price you pay if you go out past 20 years. But so we're always considering the market and what your goals are, how much you think you can afford, what else you might be trying to bring in the next couple of years. We normally would develop a capital plan that would involve, a capital plan. We would develop a debt model of your existing debt plus what you're doing now, plus what you think you're doing next year, plus what you think you're doing in the next 3 or 4 years, and try to show you your options with regard to multi-year planning. If that's what an issuer wants. We
So
have that
that-
with most issuers.
So
You know,
what
Dover has
we,
been issuing a lot of debt for a while. This is this amount and this next 14 million sounds like you know, it's not that it's pent up, but it's here it is that you've got a lot to think about.
right, so what we, what is missing in our ability to make an educated decision is somewhat of a debt waterfall schedule. So that we look at our existing debt, understand how that gets paid down, and then layering on this new debt, so we can see what the impact of debt service is going to be on our overall operating budget,
That's what we gave you.
regardless of whether
That
the
is what-
debt is exempt or non-exempt.
So
Because
that's what we
either way,
gave
we
you.
have to pay for it.
So that's what we gave you. Column A is your existing debt. Column A in the top 3 boxes is your existing general fund debt service. It's how much principal and interest you pay each year through the life of all of the town's current outstanding debt.
Yeah, so I get,
And
okay.
and then in the blue boxes, column D in both of those 2 boxes is your existing debt excluded debt. And there's there's different considerations for all of it. So in your debt excluded debt, you've got 26 million currently outstanding. You would be thinking right now of selling another 780,000 next to it.
Right.
On
So
your
I don't mean to interrupt you. I know you're on a roll, but what would be really helpful is to see it by issuance. I believe this is cumulative. So the 26 million is primarily the new community center, but there's still some debt associated with the Springdale property, I believe.
The community, the project in the blue columns, the column D in each is all of your debt excluded debt, including it's everything. And up above, column A's in the boxes that have some green, that's all of your other debt. So
Okay,
that is the big picture, and we can show you the breakdown. You know,
Right.
we wanted to make this as easy as possible to explain. You know, it's not that we joke a lot that this isn't exactly rocket science, but it's not something that is very easy to. It's complicated how it comes about. So we tried to make this as simple as we could to kind of show you the big picture of the kinds of what you needed to see in order to make a decision. If it's not enough,
Right.
we're happy to
right,
give you more
and
information.
I appreciate that. It's just if I were to build this model, I would have shown the components and then putting it, because I'm just curious about what's left on each of the projects that we had.
We
And
can show you that.
especially as we look at this 14 million, it's going to be a hodgepodge of things.
Well,
And what I'm trying to understand is would it behoove us to put all the debt for vehicle replacements into one bond offering? So wait 3 years, and then all the debt for infrastructure in another.
Can I just say that is not something that people generally would do.
Okay.
They mix what you need cash for and what you're trying to accomplish. They mix it together. Each piece is structured separately. If you've got 5 trucks, some have a useful 5 years, 7 years, 10 years. We put that next to what's have a useful life of 15 years, and it sells as a single bond. We can do anything you want. Believe me, we can do it. We can't do it while we're talking. This took us hours to put this together so you could try to understand it.
But if I can, I think I want to go back to an analogy. You're trying to give us a fish so we can eat tonight. We're trying to
No.
learn how to fish. We've got to
That's-
understand the core components that go into this. And so if we could just work through the list, because we keep going to the schedule, and until we understand the individual components that make it up, we're not going to be able to get there and join you.
You want to see what makes up the size of the right now? Is that what you're saying?
No,
Well-
but it just we've gone through cost, we've gone through amortization.
Mhm.
But I would like to go through that the list of questions if we may, because
Of course.
it's going to help me tremendously so I can have an intelligent discussion. And
Where are we on the list? Let's go.
well, okay, so useful life. Do you have a table or a schedule, or does Moody's have the same?
No.
for
State law
different types of-
state law dictates the useful life depending upon the asset. So we can show you it's chapter 44, section 7 and 8 dictate exactly how long you can issue debt for different purpose
I
projects.
believe we have that, but if we could ask you to send that over just to make sure we're all on the same page, literally, that would be
No
very
problem.
helpful.
Sure.
Because we just want to make sure that, we don't want to go beyond a useful life, but for optionality, we would like to know what the maximum useful life is. So
Sure.
for
And
something
just
like
so
a
you know,
truck, I mean, a building, we're going to go to 20 years. But for a fire truck, a highway truck, what is appropriate for that? Additional equipment like new HVAC. What is the expected useful life of that? Is it 20? I don't know, but I would
well,
love
usually
to
for
learn.
well, the state doesn't dictate. They ask the town what you think the useful life is. They say that for equipment, if you think you've got a piece of equipment like a ladder truck, and the existing ladder truck has lasted 20 years, then you could probably estimate that the new ladder truck would last 20 years too. That
Right?
is
You
how
want to
it's
tell them what
based.
our current fire truck being replaced, how old it is?
Is it 40 years?
Pretty
It's
close.
34.
Yeah. So, but so the state dictates the useful life, the maximum useful life of any kind of of a project, but you can't go past it. Bond counsel wouldn't give you a legal opinion. It's not legal to go past the useful life.
Perfect.
So
So if we got that scheduled, then we'll be right in lockstep because no
Yeah.
one wants
Okay.
to violate anything.
Okay, next,
And so
Next.
that's a state issue. So Moody's doesn't care.
no,
Perfect. So size of bond issues. On a practical sense, I mean, I don't think we're going to take $500,000 and ask you to issue a 20-year bond. But if we're in that 3 million to 10 million range of a bond, other than amortizing the fixed costs and variable costs that we just spoke about, is there any reason to, other than interest rates, issue right away versus wait and let more of these capital projects roll on?
well, interest rates are the biggest factor, where
But
you
we
think
don't
they're
know what
headed.
those are going to be, so we can't plan for it.
Okay, right. Well, the other one is timing. I mean, the 14 million you're talking about, that could take you 5 years to get that together from what little I'm hearing. But
Yeah.
you know, what's your best guess? If that's 5 years, well, are you going to push this 3 million that you need now? You're going to push it out 5 years. And it may be that you want, when you get around to it, that you want this 3 million to be well paid for and then bring on the next 14 million. So the next 14 million is a big issue in terms of big consideration in terms of what's in it and the useful life and when might you need any of it. And, you know, when might you start and finish a project that's something other than equipment? So we would normally ask about those kinds of things. We have been asking, you know, is there anything besides this 3 million? So you do have the consideration of the other 14 million. You could very easily issue this 3 million as a note, take it out a year and see if you know more about the 14 million in a year.
Well, we do know a lot about the 14 million. You know, what we don't
Yep.
know is whether our estimate is correct. So again, the 14 million consists of the schools are beginning to age. So we have roof replacements, HVAC replacements. We also have town infrastructure replacements in terms of culverts, you know, things like that. So
So
we believe, you know, the roofs, the culverts probably have a similar useful life. I think, you know, all the HVACs are coming up on 20 years, I think, right?
This is including
Yeah.
the school roof. That was
Yeah.
2001.
So those are the things, those are our big costs.
So one of the questions on the roofs is, can you get any money from the Mass School Building Authority toward the cost of those roof projects? That would be one question. And the question on the culvert is there any, can that go through the Mass Clean Water Trust in any way?
Yeah, and
Probably
we
not.
and that's, you know, this is all part of our capital process, trying to get grants or funding to reduce the costs. So when we think of the plan, it's not net of that. You know, when
So
we
normally,
look out in the future, it's not net of that. But as we get closer to having to replace it, we begin to apply for those kinds of grants.
well, so normally for projects like that, you would issue bans until you know your final project cost. One of the things that nobody wants you to do is over issue your local share of the project cost.
Right.
So we would look into that with you. We would also look into, you know, this is the first we're hearing about the 14 million. So there's, you know, we would look into when you need any of the 14 million, what's your best guess as a cash flow? I mean, we normally, when we build a model so that you can see what everything might look like in terms of cost, we would make certain assumptions and then we'd revisit the assumptions every 6 months or so, depending upon how fast you might start to need money to revisit and update the model. So the 14 million should be included in the model. And from what I'm hearing, this whole conversation, it's making me think that you might be more comfortable issuing a note for whatever it is you need, issue it for a year and see what more you know about the timing and the cost of the 14 million.
we do have some sense of what that timing and cost will be, and it's basically part of our 5-year planning. But it's still a question of how we can finance all of that, and that's, I think, the big thing that's concerning us.
Is there any part of the 14 million that would be debt excluded? That would be the first question to
Well,
make
That's
sure. we
part
have-
Again,
of-
though, so
That's
sorry,
part of our
we-
decision-making
yeah.
process, but we need.
Okay.
We have a
I mean, this is
discussion
why
about
we're
that.
having this conversation today, you know.
No, I
certainly
can
we
imagine that it's
believe-
frustrating not knowing a lot. We know a lot. We're trying to share with you what we can and give you a little bit of comfort level. You're raising a lot of really good questions. You know a lot more about what you think than what we know. We're trying to find out what you think so that we can react to it and give you
Right.
information so that you can think some more.
Okay,
We don't
so-
make decisions. We don't make decisions for you. I just want you to be clear on that. We no
Yeah, no,
decisions. do we
understood,
make for
but you have the information that will allow us all collectively to make the best decision for
I-
Dover.
I know we're trying to give you as much as we
Right.
can.
Would one approach for us to sort of lay out what we think our capital expenses are going to be over the next 5 years, give that to you, and
Okay.
then try and develop a model on the basis of that?
That's fine. We can do that. We can't do it today, but we can certainly do it.
No, I'm
probably
not
Of course,
expecting
no,
this
but
today.
before we even ask you that, well, I've still got a few more questions, if I may.
So can I
You
just
know-
say one more thing? Because I feel as though the Hilltop group, you feel, we are not trying to put you on the spot. We have a short-term issue that we're trying to solve, and then we have a longer-term issue that we're trying to solve. So the short-term issue for us is just understanding what our options are for this 3 million and change debt. And then the longer-term option, and you've given us a lot of great information that's going to help us, and we're also going to work with the Collins Center, is really putting in what I call a bond strategy for the town so that we feel as though we're making intelligent recommendations when we go to town meeting. So for us, this 14 million, it's in our long range model at 14 million, because that's the most conservative thing for us to do. We're hoping we can find money to reduce it. We're hoping we can push some of the stuff out. But at the end of the day, I think it's important for us to understand if we have to bond $14 million, what does it look like to us as a town, over the next 10 to 20 years? So we're just trying to get information.
So your options right now with regard to the 3 million, which is where you started, is
Right.
to issue a bond or a note. Those are the basic options.
Right.
And since you've got a lot, you're sharing a lot of what you have that we've never seen. We've never seen your model, and that would be something that to help you better we should see. But you could, and all we do is model debt. That's all we do. That's what we do. We give advice on how to structure and model debt all day, every day for the last 50 years. And
That's what we need.
We will be asking, trust me.
Well, collectively, between Abby, Melissa, and myself, we've got 100 years of doing this. So, so you can issue a bond or a note. And if you want to issue a note, it's no big deal if you need the cash. And if you don't need the cash, even as soon as we were thinking you needed the cash, we can get it for you when you want it as a note and get it out there after you've had more chance to show us and talk to us more about what you want to see. I'm gathering what you want to see is a plan to show that you can afford everything you want to do, the 14 million and the 3 million, make it as cost efficient as possible, and see
Bingo.
what the Collins Center comes up with.
There's also one more topic, though, at least that I really need some clarity on before we progress. And that is included versus excluded debt.
Right.
And right now we've got about a 4% gap in our tax levy. But we could see 2 higher inflation years plus the cost of this unexcluded debt, which would very quickly put us in a Prop 2.5 override scenario. And My question is, why would we not exclude all of our debt? What would be the reason to put it into the budget and have it part of the count against Prop 2.5?
Well, you'd have a lot of more flexibility with your operating budget if you excluded your debt. And there's a lot of small communities, population-wise, that do exactly that. My town's one of them. Cohasset, that excludes all of their debt. There's a lot of small communities. I mean, and a place like Dover with the tax base that you've got, you would think that the population might be more than willing to do that, to exclude the debt. Then it's got an end date. When the debt matures 20 years from now, it's over. It's nothing is excluded versus an operating override, which goes ad infinitum. So, there's nothing, there's back to there's no wrong answers. What comes out of a conversation like this is what makes sense for Dover and a plan for Dover. The plan for Dover is different than the plan for any other community in the state. This is not like, pick your own, pick A, B, C, or D. It's not like that. It's through conversations where we start to understand, which we're understanding more and more, that we talk with you about what it is that you even feel that you're facing right now, which is a crunch because it's 14 million. We didn't know about the 14 million. So that is a
Right,
big
but that's
concern.
why, so, but back to excluded, is there any downside by excluding all of the debt? Would
No.
Moody's frown on it? Would you frown on it?
No,
So-
they actually, they do the opposite of frowning. They think it's great. They're happy to see that you're willing to pay for more and not squeeze your budget where you might be inclined to draw down on reserves in order to deal with the debt service and the squeeze and to balance the budget. They want to see structural balance with your operating budget. Your ongoing revenues meets your ongoing expenditures, that you're not relying on free cash unless it's a direct capital outlay, that you're not relying on free cash to balance and pay for debt service.
Correct.
wanna see
So again, I just want to make sure that, so going forward, what I just heard from you is it would make sense for flexibility purposes to have town meeting exclude any further debt. Because otherwise it's going to count against Prop 2.5, and under some reasonably yet negative scenarios, we could be right at our levy limit.
Well, as you develop your debt policies, and there's multiples that can be considered, one of them would be what amount of debt can you afford inside the lower levy limit, if any, and if so, would it be a small truck? Or what amount of debt are you going to pay directly with cash? Because I know you're doing that. How many trucks do you want to pay for with cash versus borrow using notes to pay for trucks and pay
Right.
it off in 5 years? I mean, there's a lot of, when we basically understand everything you're thinking about in the next 5 or 10 years, and if there's anything as in the horizon past that is looming, we would model it, and then and it sounds like you have modeled it, but let's see what you've done, and we take a look at it to see what it's showing in terms of constraints and impact on the credit. We want you to maintain your AAA as you go forward. That's normally something that we keep in mind when we're structuring debt, that we don't want to compromise your credit with anything that we would suggest or have that you consider.
Thank you. And then that's why we don't even want to be in the position of going to you with something that would have a negative implication on our credit rating. So that's why we want to get educated. So we know. But you just came upon a topic that it's kind of like an elephant on the table, but we need to discuss it. And that is through an administrative lapse. We lost our AAA bond rating to Moody's. And part of this strategy is, how do we get that AAA rating back? And is there anything we need to consider on the 3 million or the very short term that might override or sway us to do something or not do something vis-a-vis that 3 million to get our AAA rating back?
Well, they pulled your rating, and we want you to get it reinstated. You need to get it reinstated.
Yes.
And they're gonna reinstate it at a rating, not necessarily AAA. But it would be hard, and we can try to evaluate the consequence of selling the $3 million as, so if you were to sell a bond right now, we've made it clear that you need a rating. If you were to sell a note, if you had an outstanding rating, you wouldn't have to get a rating on the notes, but you don't have an outstanding rating right now. So we need you to consider getting it reinstated. And what would help it would be, and you're not going to have it, is the 24 audit. And this is a big consideration that if you wait to issue notes and you get past June 30 before you borrow notes, let's say, the longer you wait, the worse it is not to have a 24 audit, but also you would want the rating reinstated based on the 23 audit is now complete. So you're raising really good questions. I think what you need to do, Moody's did come out with the questions that they wanted answered.
Right.
We've got the questions right here. Have you seen them?
No,
I don't believe I have. At least nothing's coming to mind. Have you seen them, Robin or Cam?
no.
Well, we could send you the questions that we've
If
got.
you could send those to us, that would be extremely helpful. Again, as you can see, we are just trying to educate ourselves because we could be in the position of making terrible mistakes. And we are really trying to avoid those by educating ourselves. So,
Well, the most important thing that I think the rating agency is going to want to understand, because of the wealth of the town gets away with, you're wealthy and the credit is very strong. So, but the lack of the delay in getting the 22 and the 23 audits, and by 23 they basically said anybody that didn't have a 23 by, I think it was September of 24, they were going to pull it. And that's what happened, but would be to explain how you're going to have timely audits going forward. When you catch up with the 24 audit, which I think we expect to be done, I think, Carl, did you say October? I think maybe we thought October. Then when the next question is, when is the 25 audit going to be done? Is it going to be done by March? Because you have more than $10 million of outstanding debt. You file annual reports called continuing disclosure every year at the end of March. The majority of issuers in Massachusetts have their audit for the prior year by March of the next year. That would be the goal, but definitely by June 30 of the following year. So the 24 audit by June 30, 25. So right now we're in June of 25 and there's no 24 audit. It's not going to be ready till October. That would be the first thing the rating agency wants to understand. The fact that there's been turnover, the fact that the auditing firms have them merged and downsized and done everything else, and they're delayed and have been delaying audits. That's part of it. But they'd want to know, what are you doing internally to meet the requirements of having timely audits? That's the biggest thing. They'd also want to know what fiscal policies you have that you can share and talk about that in terms of maintaining your reserve position going forward. And then also, what kind of debt are you planning to bring coming forward? And how are you going to afford that? A model, you've all been producing a model and making a lot of decisions and assumptions about your model. We should look at it and give you our 2 cents, but and maybe create a different kind of a model for you. I don't know. And you should feel prepared going into the rating issue. It doesn't sound like Melissa, this is the list of questions, right? That we got from Moody's. Yeah, so we've sent this. I don't know what the town thinks about these questions. They seem like pretty normal questions, but given, I think you'd be fine answering these questions and you could get, I think that based on your reserve positions and the strength of your reserves, even with $14 million of debt coming down the road, I think you can get reinstated at your AAA, and that you can, and I'm not guaranteeing it. We should talk some more. You should read these questions and we should see what you've got looking at the future, whatever you've been doing internally that assesses the future that you're facing. But
well, that's the
you
Collins Center, and I mean, it's on our radar. We know we need to do a lot of work. What we didn't want to do was start doing the work without having the same facts, conditions that all of us can know about. And so you know, at least I'll just speak for myself. My greatest fear is doing something that is going to harm the town going forward. That's
Well,
what I'm trying to avoid.
Well, based on what you've been saying or what we've been hearing in the last, toward the end of last week and now with regard to the useful life of projects and why not go out the longest term, there's nothing wrong with going out 15 years on all of this if you were to issue long-term debt. And then that protects your flexibility to bring on more debt next to it without necessarily having to debt exclude it. I mean, I don't think you should do normally if people, if an issuer has excess room under the lower levy limit of Prop 2.5, or if it's not that much of an impact and there's debt declining at the same as what would come on, they might choose the shorter amortization to save interest cost. It's not that much additional interest cost to go out 15 years versus this first schedule on either scenario. That hearing what you're saying, if you liked where bond rates were and you wanted to lock something in because the next 14 million, I can guess that between how long it takes the Collins Center to do what they're doing, how long it takes to consider your options associated with that's not going to happen anytime soon. You could just, to protect your flexibility, you would take advantage of going out longer on this debt and taking it out the longer term. We are happy to show you, we have a wealth of information about your debt. We can show it to you the way, Robin, you asked to see it. You want to see each project and how much, how your outstanding debt, how it pays off. We're happy to give you that. I think, Abby, I don't know, do we give the town a debt book each year? I think, do we have a debt book that we should give the town? I mean, you could look at all your debt schedule by debt schedule and see when it was issued and when it pays off. We thought showing you the aggregate because it's all paid back with your general fund. It almost doesn't matter. You can see it's declining, but
No, but it's
back
the
to your
waterfall schedule that allows us to look out and see the relief. So that would be helpful. But
You somewhat
well, you
have
don't
a
have much of a
waterfall
waterfall.
schedule here,
What's
because
that?
I said you somewhat have a waterfall in what you prepared. What in my mind, what I was envisioning was having the years in columns going this way and each of the projects so that I could see each year. You just have it
Were
going.
you hoping to see that for this issue now or for the 14 million or everything?
I in in order to feel, the first question we have is, can we afford to buy all the stuff that everybody wants that in aggregate equals $14 million? That's the first question we need to answer. And by affording, can we afford the debt service on that as a town? I believe the answer is yes, but I would like to see it. Then the question is, well, does it make sense, to purchase? This is a wish list from every department. There's some needs to have, there's some things that can be pushed out. So then we have to ask ourselves, well, within all these projects that total 14 million, are there items that can get pushed out a little bit? And does it help us as a town to push out some of these projects? Because some of the smaller debt, we're going to start seeing relief from that. So we're just trying to understand what, as Dave says, what our options are, and we want to make educated decisions or educated recommendations. So today you've given us a lot of food for thought. We wanted to understand, how we could get back our AAA rating. A news item to me is that the 24 audit is an issue. And, immediately my question is there any way we could get that done sooner than October? But it sounds like the audit firms are backed up. Then I would say we absolutely have to guarantee that our 25 audit is going to get done on a timely basis. And for me, that means it needs to get done by March. And being a finance person, 6 months should be more than enough time to prepare for an audit.
Well, now that we have
Well-
staff that
Well, not yet.
well,
Not completely.
we have half the house completely done, and we've got a great temporary situation. We're losing Carl, but we've gained Chris. And you know, we're taking this very seriously, but going back to then right now in the $3 million before us, if we issued right now with the 23 audit, would the 3 million, but I heard you say that they won't issue a bond rating for less than 5 million. Is that, did I
But
hear
we
that
don't
correctly?
have a bond
No,
rating
no, no,
right
no,
now.
no, 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 sorry. I know that we've given you a lot of information. For a note, if you're selling less than dollars on a note, which is if you sold a note right now for 3 million,
Okay, so
we would not
I'm
get it
not nearly
rated.
concerned about the note because it's a note, it's a ban. I'm not worried about it. But what about the bond? Is there, in other words, should we, you see the strategy question, should we try to do the 3 million now under a bond to get the AAA back? Or
Maybe. There's
should
no
we
guarantee.
ban for, until we're past 24 and wait for the 25?
You,
And then we're gonna have very good clarity on the rest of the 14 million.
you don't need clarity on the 14 million. I think one of the things you might want to consider, I'm not changing the subject, but I'm looking at, you've got 2.8 million of unused levy capacity under the lower levy limit. To understand what competing needs there are for that 2.8 million before you decide you should debt exclude everything. I think that you clearly can afford, whether it's excluded, maybe it has to be excluded, but you can afford $14 million. It's hard to think that the community with the wealth that Dover has can't afford 14 million if in fact it wants to afford $14 million worth of infrastructure repair. Going back to your question, if it's a note, I'm saying we wouldn't get it rated, but we would get your rating reinstated. We would not get the note rated itself, but we would get the rating itself reinstated. It's two different things. If you sell bonds, you need the bonds rated. So we would get it rated, reinstated, and we would rate the bonds. If you sold notes, we would not get the notes rated, but we would get the rating reinstated. The sooner you get the rating reinstated, the better, because the less they're going to want to ask questions about the 24 audit, which it's unrealistic to think you can get it done before probably October with the delays from the external auditors and with the amount of work it's still going to take to get that. I mean, I can see going forward from the 24, make it clear to the external auditor, get your ducks in line internally and make sure that you can get something done for the 25 audit. That would mean, right after the 24 is done in October, you need to go right away and you've got 6 months and that's it. Or even if it was done by June and you got on a schedule of getting it by March, even if it took another year and a half. I mean, I think we've explained to the rating agency that there were reasonable, not excuses, but reasonable
Circumstances.
reasons. Yeah,
Yeah.
circumstances why, but they don't really care. But yes, but it was reasonable, and they've started to accept the fact that CBiz at this point is delayed on, we still got 24 audits that aren't done right now, and the 23 audits, there were a number that didn't have the 23s for a while. So anyway, but so nothing, your options are all wide open. Nothing is stopping you from doing what you want. If you want to lock in rates on bonds, you could. If you were, based on this conversation, you would want to consider a long-term structure, not a shorter one, the longer one. And maybe you're not ready to make any commitment like that. And you'd prefer, and you don't think rates are going to go up that much higher. If they go higher, and maybe it's more likely they'll go lower, issue a note for whatever it is you need and take more time to do all of this other than to get your rating reinstated. You should get your rating reinstated as soon as you read the questions if you think you can answer them, because I think your answers now are going to be better than if you wait and the audit's still not available for fiscal 24.
Okay, can
Okay,
I
well,
just
that was
get
what-
clarification on one item?
Yeah,
you can get your rating reinstated regardless of whether or not you're gonna issue debt. Is that correct?
correct. Now that you have your 23 audit, you can go back after getting
Okay.
the rating
So,
reinstated.
so
That's what
to me, that is something we need to do.
I agree.
Yep.
And we have questions that we can
Right,
forward.
right.
You should all read the questions and decide. We actually have a date set for a rating call, but we can cancel that. We had a date set. I don't know how we got this far with everything with the kinds of questions that we're hearing, but we had a rating, we canceled it. And we changed for a new rating call at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock on June 5th.
Right.
That maybe we should just change to have that be rating reinstated and get you notes when you want notes. We wouldn't rate notes because
see,
they're too
right.
small.
See, I was under the erroneous assumption that they were linked.
Yeah, me
And
too, me too.
So if we can get the AAA rating reinstated now, regardless,
Dave, I just need to say, get the rating reinstated. There's no guarantees we're gonna get a AAA rating.
thank you. You're,
Right.
you're absolutely correct. I'm just being an optimist. Unusual for me. So if we can go through that process from a position of strength, and we will be relying on you to tell us what is our strength. Once we see these questions, we give you answers. If now's the time to get that AAA, then or attempt to get the AAA, let's go for it. But we want to do it from a position of strength to the best of our ability, knowing that the 24 audit is likely to be 3 months late, June to October, 4 months
Well,
late.
we would want to make sure, and I'm just looking at, so you get 2.8 million unused levy capacity under the lower levy limit, 50 million under the primary levy limit. And I'm looking at your reserve positions. You've got good reserves. You've got real good reserves.
And we've also significantly paid down our OPEB liability. I mean, that's been one of our strategies.
Well, so I think that so one of the things that you don't have is a formal. So I think you've got everything is really good and warrants the AAA, including the tax base. What you don't have necessarily you do have fiscal policies. I think you sent those in the other day, didn't you? Your fiscal policies, Carl, Chris, do you have formal fiscal?
We have a formal reserve policy.
That's the one they like.
And a capital policy as well.
Okay, so what you don't have is a formal capital plan, and what you don't have is a multi-year forecast of your operations, including your debt service built into it, your projected debt service for the 14 million and anything else in the future.
We do
like
have
a
that.
5-year
We
forecast.
have that as well. Yeah,
We have that.
we've projected that. We
You
have
have that.
models and all that. Yep.
So then I think that's what they want to see. They want to see that you're planning ahead. And that would be the only area. The only other area that goes against the town is its small size. But your population's grown, so that's good too. I mean, I think that one of the
Can
things
we
we
count
would do.
horses?
What's that?
I said, can we count horses? We're getting a big horse barn here, so.
We'll just count the horses. We won't tell you.
They count
Well,
as
one of the
half,
things-
Robin. So
I think they should
One of the
be
things that
two
we-
times a person, one horse, 2 times a person.
The other thing that you should see is what the credit report, how it reads from the last time the town was had its credit rating updated. Have you seen that?
No,
no.
Okay, so you need that. You need the questions, and then after you've read both of those, and have you seen the disclosure that we've put together and updated with the administration that you were going to use to sell bonds or notes?
no.
We should give you
No.
that too. You should look at all
Yeah.
3 of those, and we should, the only last question, I think we should either have this call, which might be too soon, or we should reschedule it. And the only question that ties into that is, when do you need it cash for any of these projects? Can you push it out and reschedule, reschedule this rating reinstatement call? Assuming
Well,
that
let me
you're
ask
selling
Chris
notes.
and Carl, when would the earliest cash call on the 2.65 be?
The only significant time constraint is with the money we'd have to give to the regional district for the turf fields. They're expecting that July 15th.
And that's 760,000, something like that.
Thereabouts, right? But the other cash needs, regardless of when we need it, we need to issue within the new DOR requirement center. Is it 60 days or 90 days from
90.
90 days? So
Yep.
we'd have to do something by the end of September. Whether
So
we
can
need the
we-
money or not, we have to issue something by the end of September.
Can
Well,
we borrow against our free cash? Can we just take some of our free cash and pay the region and give ourselves a little bit of time?
You could just use your regular cash, not your free cash, but not your so-called free cash, but your regular cash balance. You can advance your cash and then reimburse your cash with note proceeds by September 30. And it won't hurt the calculation of free cash that gets certified as of July 1 of 2025. So you could do that, just regular cash, assuming you've got regular cash. I'm assuming you do.
Well, actually, you're mostly on target. So we can advance, you're right, so you can advance ourselves or advance for capital. But that calculation that DOR requires you to do is based on how much money you have in free cash, of which as of July 1, we have 0 free cash, right? Because it hasn't been recertified. And it's based on a percentage of our stabilization fund. So we may not have enough to do the advance that you're suggesting we do, because again, as of July 1, we have no certified free cash.
Well, it's two things. So the DOR just came out with this new willingness to allow all the cities and towns to reimburse themselves after the end of the fiscal year by September 30th. I'm not sure if they haven't provided more relief on what you're saying, Carl, but we'll double check. But we can get a note out by July 15. We could get a note issued. Or we can get a note issued probably by June 30th. We just don't, right now we scheduled the call with the rating agency for this Thursday. Given that the select board members haven't seen, let me ask a question. Would the select board members all think that they want to be on the rating call? Is
No,
that
but
what you
we'd
think?
certainly like to understand what
Okay.
going to be
then-
presented and read it and see if we have any comments.
So why don't you look at I think we should show you the questions. We should show you the last credit report, and we should show you the town's disclosure document that would be used right now to issue notes or bonds. It's got a wealth of information about the town, all in one place.
That would be
And you-
hugely helpful. It's
and you
because it's
could look at-
factual and
Right.
we'll all read it.
Yes.
And
What I would
Agreed.
also like to see is a draft of the answers to those questions.
Well, the town is who answers them, not us. We don't
Right.
answer them. We're
No,
asking the
but
town.
everybody's on here, so I think that would be part of a
Sure.
total package.
Yes, definitely. The subjects are just real quick: long-term debt, economy, finances, cybersecurity. They don't have a lot of questions. I think they feel pretty up to date.
Right.
well, we don't use computers in Dover, so that one's good. So, no, all kidding aside, we will happily digest everything you just talked about.
And turn it around quickly.
Yes, and I think it might make sense to have the rating call delayed a week or two.
I agree.
So that we're not under any kind of significant time gun.
Yep.
What I also heard is that can you do more than one ban in a year? So let me ask that question.
Yes, you can do as many bands in a year. It would be not
So
that
we can
it
do the
would cost more.
700. We can do the 700 for the schools right now, which is the time critical issue.
Yep.
And then we can take a deep breath, learn as much as we need to learn, do as much as we possibly can do to better our position, and then move forward now that we're all on the same page. And as we start to digest and, then we can come back to you and say, we'd like you to run the following 3 scenarios, not 300. I know you guys
Yeah.
like to run scenarios, but
Right.
we don't want to waste time.
Right. So Dave, I would just amend what you said to ask the team here to see if there are any additional funds that we need between now and September and add those into that ban. Because it does cost money and I'd rather just pull it all together.
Well said,
I was gonna
Robin.
catch
Thank you.
this.
I agree.
I was going to ask the same thing because if all you want is the 700,000, we might start thinking about issuing it a different way than with a ban. We might issue it through the DOR and just get rid of it. And maybe not.
There are other projects that we need to fund before September 30th.
Right. So we should just
Okay.
add everything together.
How much does that all come to?
It's in,
Would you guess?
it's in the document, that one-page document that we
Oh, I know
send you
which
on-
document you mean.
That
Yep.
shows all of our needs, our funding needs, yeah.
Okay, so we can send you this afternoon, if we haven't already while we're talking, the last rating report, the Moody's list of questions, and the draft of the disclosure document, so you can look at that with a copy of the 23 audit attached. So you can see that. I don't know if you've seen the 23 audit.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
we have seen that.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Carl, do we need the full 3.3 million before September?
No, we don't need the full amount before September. But we'll need another million of it, just as an example, by the end of the calendar year for the fire truck.
Okay.
So just to be mindful that every time we issue, there's a cost to issuing.
So maybe we
Um,
just do the
so-
3.3 million as a ban for now while we get our ducks in a row. Because now that it's not tied to the agency, I mean, we do run the risk, we do run interest rate risk. So if stagflation comes into play, we made a bad choice because rates will go up.
And you'll be paying twice for issuing costs. You'll
Right.
be paying for bond and issuing costs and whatever the next thing we issue is.
So I would like to confirm one other thing. If we issue this as debt, and right now we don't have permission to do excluded debt, so we would put this debt under the levy limit, can we change that at a later
Yes.
date? And are there any consequences to doing that?
No.
Okay, all right, I'm good.
Yes,
Yeah, that's good to hear.
That's a very good point, Robin. So we can take some of the non-excluded debt if we choose, bring that to town meeting, ask them to exclude it.
Right.
If they agree, then to me, it's a pressure on the levy limit that we don't need to put on ourselves in the future, knowing what the capital requests coming down the pike are, and with a likelihood that we're going to see some slightly higher inflation.
Right, which to me is a reason to just bond this now and be over it. You know,
Bond it or ban it?
bond it, because if cuts are already reflected in these rates, then I'm gonna hedge my bets. And not that I have a crystal ball, but there is a chance that rates are gonna go up. And I don't think we're gonna get more than 2 decreases in bond rates. So to hedge my bets, I would just do a bond.
But then that would have to be rated, right?
But we're going
Yes.
out to get it rated in any events.
Okay.
Is the timing gonna work that way where we can go and try and get our rating, and then, because if we do bond this, we have to do it right away because the schools need the money. And so we won't have our bond rating by the time we need to issue this debt.
Oh,
We're
so
pro-
I was under the impression we could do like a really short-term ban and then convert it. I could be wrong.
You can do all of the above, but I'm hearing a lot of things thrown out. And I'm wondering a little bit, my first question is, you've got $2 million of unused levy capacity under the lower levy limit. Why, how much of that are you willing to use up for debt service? That's one question. That's not excluded because you get 50 million on top of that that you could exclude annually. So I'm just
That's-
wondering why you'd want to get it, but maybe you want to leave the 2 million there for flexibility for operations. So that's
we do.
fine.
And we want
Okay.
to understand, certainly 3.2 million in debt is not, the debt service associated with that is not going to significantly utilize that
No,
excess capacity that we have. And this is exactly why we're looking for the Collins Center to come in here and kind of help us. So we have a better understanding of.
okay. Well, so so back to what you were saying, Dave, about the timing, if we send you this information, I mean, maybe we could have the call Thursday still. We can cancel it or we can have it. Today's only Monday. So we've got 3 days to prepare to have the call with regard to calling it a reinstatement, and that the town may be selling bonds after that back to back or not. And if you issue a note after that, it wouldn't be rated. And then you've got time to, I want to sort out this. Do you need money before June 30 or by July 15, or could it be after July 15? So we have to make sure we're clear on that. And we can get you a ban. We're positioned to get you a ban or a bond in rapid fire time. I mean, we had
Rapid fire time.
the time is, let me see, we have a schedule here. We've redone it.
We were July 26th as we were looking at delivery of funds. I'm sorry, June 26th.
Okay.
June 26th, we're on schedule to deliver money we were going to advertise this week. We were going to sell on June 10th and we were going to deliver on June 26th. We could push it back a teeny bit, still sell in June 26th or before July 15 to get a ban out or a bond. We just have the feds meet on, where are they? They're on June.
Well, what did Powell say today? Does anybody know? He was
I do-
supposed
I
to
don't-
talk at 1.
Said, I don't push me on rates. He's like, don't push. That I'm not. He said something like it was. He didn't say I might change. I might lower rates. He didn't. He wouldn't say that. I don't want to make that sound. He said, don't push me on rates. He said, I'm going by the numbers. I think that's what he said. I'm going by the numbers. I mean, we don't know what the numbers are yet. We haven't really seen the tariffs kick in.
No.
What the tariffs are. So
But if we were to commit to trying to get that Moody's meeting done on Thursday, we'd probably have to know what the questions are to get comfortable with answering them.
Well, we
we
know
have the questions. We have the questions
Yeah.
right here.
Yeah, staff,
Right.
We sent
yeah,
them to the
staff is,
town, right?
staff is all prepared to answer those questions. Yeah.
Right.
Great, excellent. So
So the question is, team here, can you prepare a package with the answers for us to look at to be ready for the meeting on June 5th? Or would you prefer that it gets pushed out a week?
We're ready to go June 5th.
Okay.
I'm ready to
Excellent.
go June 5th. I'm not doing all the questions, but Chris and Michael are doing some and Amy's doing some, but I believe we're all ready to go June 5th. Yeah.
Correct.
Yes, just for the board's benefit, we met internally to review and get the staff answers, so we were prepared for the 5th, so we can be ready to go.
Great.
Great.
Well, because what's interesting is then we all can digest on whether or not we want to issue a bond or a note. Because it sounds to me like we need the money and we've got to do it. And is there any advantage to tying our $2.6 million bond issue to the re-rating conversation, or are they completely separate?
Good question.
No, you're going to want to say we may be selling bonds in the next couple of weeks. We're trying to make a decision, and yeah, because they're going to want to know what kind of capital needs do you have, and how soon are you thinking you might be selling bonds, and whether or not you're selling notes, or when are you coming in the market? What's coming behind it? The 14 million at some point in the next 3, 4, 5 years, that kind of thing. You could tell them you were going to make it clear that you're in the process of putting together with the Collins Center a formal capital plan to evaluate what you want to do. You've got unused levy capacity, but you don't necessarily want to use it. So your sense is that you don't necessarily want to use it for debt service. So you're looking at whether or not you want to start excluding debt service, but you've got a lot of unused levy capacity if you decide not to. I mean, you want to talk about your flexibility when you have the conversation with them. You use free cash to pay direct capital outlay. You've got a good history of doing that. In fact, if you're selling bonds or getting a rating on anything, we would probably want to get kind of a comprehensive list of what you have actually spent in direct capital outlay from free cash, because that's a big positive. What you've done with OPEB is a big positive. We want to bring out all the positives to show your strength and your capacity. I mean, your tax base is your biggest strength. And
But to Robin's question, or I guess it was a statement, why don't we just go ahead and issue the bond now? This would be a tipping point for me to go with a bond issue if it's going to help our rating process. Right?
well,
I mean,
it doesn't necessarily help the rating process, but it might help the town. That's where we started this conversation. We've been prepared to issue bonds, but now we're getting second guessed as to whether or not, in conversations with your administration, now the Board of Selectmen is saying, wait a second, we've got this 14 million, should we be selling bonds or notes? And that's why we're here today, is to help see if we can help you make a decision. We're not trying to hinder it. We're trying to help you.
no, I understand,
We
but
agree
but
with that.
again, if the rating process is in any way helped by our actually issuing
It's
a
not.
bond.
It's not. They don't
They're
care.
completely independent
they're
of
Okay,
all.
two
so
completely
then
different
then
things.
we have that flexibility. So
I
we
mean,
have
the
to issue
only,
debt.
if
It's just-
you do a bond, if I understand this right, if you do a bond, you need a rating. So
Yes.
you can't do a bond without the rating. But
Correct.
getting a rating is independent of whether or not you want to issue a bond right now. Which
Correct. Getting a
is why if
reinstatement.
the team needs more time, because you have one bite, do it once to put together a more compelling story, I say, wait, we certainly have an option to do a ban to get
Well,
them
we're-
to the
But
rate
we're,
by June.
just so we're clear though, but we're losing our opportunity to do a bond as we go into next fiscal year because we don't have a 24 audit.
That's a key.
So every day we're into July, every day it gets a little bit dicier not having a 24 audit to then issue a bond.
Right.
Where now we can issue the bond and don't have to worry for a year or 2 years.
That's a
That's-
good, that's a
That's a
good
very
point.
good point.
If you sold the bond that goes out 15 years, you're leaving all your flexibility with regard to adding any more debt to it. Like you said before, Robin, it's not a lot of debt service annually. It's not going to cut into your unused levy capacity, your lower levy limit
And you can
capacity.
change it if you want. That's what you told me. If I want to make it.
Well,
I
I'm
can.
saying you can get the town to vote to exclude that debt service on that bond if you ultimately decide you want to do that. And you've meanwhile, hedged your bets on everything by selling 15-year debt instead of the shorter debt, which would cost a little bit more. It's not that much over the life of the bond. You could, if you got your rating reinstated, you could turn around right after in the following week. You could tell them when you're reinstating the rating, we may be back to you next week wanting you to rate a bond. It's two different things. They might be able to link it together. It doesn't matter. We would be transparent with regard to that you want the rating reinstated. You're still debating whether or not to issue a bond or a note. If it's a bond, you'll be right back at them, but you needed to get the rating reinstated before you could do anything.
So,
As simple as that.
yeah, let me one very small point, but I just want to make sure I understand it. If we're just going for a reinstatement, we won't have any premium to pay any of these costs that we're incurring for the reinstatement. Is that
That's
right?
correct. Well, I don't think that they're charging for the reinstatement. I think that that might be free. If you sell bonds, they'll charge you. But if you sell notes, there'd be a fee, but we probably, if it's a year note at 3 million, I would sell, I think it would make sense to sell the money that you would have bonded at 3 million, whatever it was, 265,000 for a year. That should be enough size to force premium to pay the
Premium.
cost of issue. But you're right. If you're just getting a reinstatement and then selling a note that's non-rated, you don't have any way to pay for
Right. We don't
the
have an
note will have to try to
appropriation
pay for itself. But I think that when you see the information we send you, the questions are pretty straightforward and simple. You probably could just know the answers by looking at this and just agree that, what was the delay in the 22 and 23 audits? I mean, when do you expect the 24 audit? We already talked about half these questions. So the town just has to decide, is our rates good enough? Is it bird in the hand worth two in the bush? Our rates, because nobody knows what's going to happen. Are the rates on this good enough? We can get you an interest rate scale on this 15-year debt and tell you what kind of an interest rate you might get if you were to sell it in the time frame that we're talking about. We had originally talked about, because it's better to do it that way than not, of selling of having a competitive sale before the feds meet. And whether or not we could do that. I mean, we didn't really want to have the feds meet, who knows how the market might react to whatever they do. We know how the market's reacting right now to what they think they might do. So we had thought about selling before the feds meet, and they meet on the June 17 and 18. We were also trying to revolve things around, I don't know if the Board of Selectmen is still thinking it's meeting on June 12th, but we may or may not be able to keep this schedule. We certainly need it.
Well, the
if-
Board of
we
Selectmen
want to
would
sell
be,
bonds.
the Board of Selectmen would be happy to do a one-off call any time of the day, related to issuing debt. So
Agreed.
Or a meeting.
we're,
So
right, right.
we are happy to meet and help meet whatever timeline is necessary.
Well, do you want to meet on Wednesday afternoon? We could do that, or Tuesday afternoon. Today's Monday. Wednesday, after you've had a chance to look at the material we send you today. I mean, you tell us. We're happy to do anything. This is all we do. So we're
Yeah, I
happy
could
to.
meet on Wednesday afternoon.
I couldn't meet between 10:30 and probably 2, but I can meet around that either before or after.
So I'm sorry, can I just jump in? So I just want to be clear. Are you suggesting the board meets again to review the questions?
To make a decision.
Package and the disclosure.
Yeah, but we
And to
can't
make a
post in
decision.
time for Wednesday.
Yeah, we can't.
Yeah, so to meet as a board, we would have to post, I think at this point, I'm not sure what the town clerk is still here. I think Thursday would be the earliest.
Right. So
Well, we could meet
it's
before the
more
rating
and
call on
more
Thursday.
apparent that you need to push that June 5th meeting out to the following week with the rating agency.
Okay,
I mean,
but then just so
we could review it and get stuff to Mike, but we couldn't talk as a group.
I don't think
Well,
I don't
what
think
we
you-
need is what we need from the town would be at a certain point a decision. And if you don't care if you don't sell bonds before the feds meet, then push it out a week.
The
So
Fed
the
would
Fed
run
meet
through the
next
4th.
Monday?
We could talk next Monday we could talk next Monday and we could clear and sell the day after. Well, no, the soonest we could sell then would be around the 24th of June. Because Juneteenth comes up, then that's a holiday. That's and the feds are meeting the 17th and 18th. You don't want to meet. You don't want to sell anything the same day they're coming out with their rate information. You could sell on the 17th, but to sell on the 17th, we'd have to clear an OS by the 11th, a disclosure document by the 11th. And if we push the rating out, we couldn't get a rating we could possibly get it by the 16th. But if when are we pushing, the call is this Thursday. if you knew what you wanted to do, we could try to have a call on Monday or Tuesday of next week. And mail on Wednesday and sell on Tuesday, the 17th. I mean, we could beat it because we're really, we could beat the coming to market before the feds if you knew what you wanted to do in bonds, that you wanted to sell a bond. Otherwise, we can sell a bond after the feds meet. It's not the end of the day. I mean, the end of the world. And we could push it out where you have whatever time you need to consider what you want to do. We're not really trying to rush you. We're trying to meet whatever schedule you might like. And this is part of the conversation to
I mean, the
tell you
only
about.
reason in my mind not to issue a bond would be if there's risk of us not getting our credit rating back in time.
Well, it's would be complicated to sell a $3 million note without your rating back. So even though you don't have to use the rating to market the bonds, as an investor, they say, oh, well, what are they rated? And then to find out that you're not rated, then you're going to pay extra for the note.
Right.
And you should get, the rating agency is going to say, you had your 23 audit. Why didn't you come back to get your rating reinstated? What are you doing?
Right. And so it's really a question of how quickly we can get the rating reinstated.
Correct.
And if that means meeting on Thursday morning, I could do that to just get an approval to proceed with the answers of the questions that Carl's already prepared.
But we can't post in time for Thursday, right?
For Wednesday.
A Thursday morning before you meet with Moody's.
So yes, we could post in time for Thursdays. I think the questions just came through. To Cinder's point, I think obviously it's great if the board wants to review them. Most of them I think are don't necessarily, you may feel differently, but may rise to the level of the board needing to review and discuss them, because I think you all know the answers. Why things start to happen. I think you'll
Right.
anticipate what the answers will be. So maybe if you have a chance to review them, I don't know if you actually are going to need to meet or want to meet. Okay, they're here.
Well, for me, I don't need to discuss them. I just like to look at the answers. So,
Yeah.
I'm
again,
the same way, Mike. It's all information gathering.
right.
I mean, we're
Sure.
trying to educate ourselves. It's a very different goal than decide something.
No, absolutely. So I guess what I'm getting at is there a need to post a meeting or not? And we certainly can. As I said, that's not on Thursday. We can't do Wednesday at this point, but Thursday
Okay,
would be.
so
Well, you could, just as a suggestion, you could walk through the questions right now. The answers are
I
probably.
I don't have time. I'm
That's fine.
right. So the question is, do we need, so there are two things going on here. One is getting the bond rating back. I think we all agree that needs to get done sooner rather than later. So if there's a way to stick to the June 5th meeting and everybody feels comfortable, we should go for it. For me, I don't need to discuss the answers, to Dave's point. I just want to read them. And if I see anything that I have a suggestion on, I can send it back to you, Mike.
Good.
Because
I have a suggestion as to how we could save a little bit of time. If we gave the heads up to the rating agency, we keep this June 5th meeting and we tell them that it's a reinstatement, that we're trying to get the rating reinstated, and the town may be selling bonds. So it's possible that we would, before they go to committee to reinstate the rating, that we would have a bondsure and the information for them to rate a bond. And we would have to find out if they could consider doing it like that. And maybe that way it would mean that after you had the call, it would mean that you'd have to be prepared though, after we have to kind of have that conversation on the reinstatement call, that we're trying to decide if we're doing a bond or note right now also. And
We'll have
if
that
it's-
information. If you send that to us today, the three
Right.
of us, we're AAA personalities. We will review it. We will have the information, and you will have Mike will have an answer certainly by Thursday morning. And if there's a follow-on question, we will ask Mike. He can get back to you and go from there. But I think we can keep the 5th. If that information comes to us, we'll crank through it If we do have any suggestions or questions, we'll forward them to Mike. Mike will then forward them to you, and we're winning all around here as long as you feel that we really have, I'm going to say, the strongest case right now to go back to Moody's and get our AAA based on the 23 audit and all the good points that Carl has made.
So in order, from what I understand, is if we wait until after the fiscal year, it becomes harder to get your rating reinstated because we won't have the 24 audit. So the time
It's not harder.
is
It's
now.
just, it's not harder. It's just that you walk in with a weaker position with no 24 audit.
Well, that means it's harder.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, it's, yeah.
So the time right now is, time is of the essence.
Yep.
So right now, we could go to the agency and we have optionality. We can actually issue debt. We can get our rating back and issue debt. And
Yep.
personally, I think it would be a really good thing to get our rating back.
Absolutely.
Right, and if we get the rating back, I think it also makes sense to issue the debt rather than do a note.
Correct.
Then we
Now,
look-
here's
I'm
another
with you
question.
there.
If we get a AA plus or a AA rating, does that change anything that we would want to do with the bond versus a ban?
I don't think so, because I don't think it's going to change the pricing very much.
Based on what I see in the municipal world, absolutely, you are correct. There's just
So I think we're all on the same page then.
yep.
Yep.
Well, that's
There you
why
go.
we
You
have
got
these
your
calls.
answer.
Yeah,
I think,
that's
though,
why
that
we have
if-
these calls.
But if you have the call on Thursday, I think you're going to need to make a decision. Ideally, you would make a decision on Friday if you want to sell bonds. If you don't want to sell bonds, they'll just go to committee and get the rating reinstated. If you want to sell bonds, they'll try to do both at the same time. And we'll give them whatever additional information they need about the bond sale. And the only other question I have is, so you've got the questions, you're looking for the answers internally, and we're going to send you the disclosure document without the 23 audit because you've already got that. And we're going to send you the calendar so you can see the calendar we're on right now. We don't have to stick to it, but at least then you can see it.
Well, we do
already
have
have that.
Yeah, we have the Hilltop Security for discussion purposes only. That calendar.
Okay.
Yeah.
We have that.
Right.
We have that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So the
Let
question.
me ask another question to Robin and Cam, if I may. Then, is everyone leaning towards issuing a bond?
I am.
I
Cam?
am. Yes.
So
Yes, I am.
why don't we say that unless there is something in the information that we're going to review that somehow would change one of our minds, that let's go ahead with the bond issue?
That was going to be
Right.
my suggestion. I think we have
That's-
to go with the premise that we're going to get our rating back and issue a bond.
Agreed.
So we'll give the rating agency that heads up so they know we're trying to accomplish both of those things at the same time.
Right.
You could still pull the bond if you want to. Your options stay open till you actually advertise the bond, and then you actually even after
Right.
that.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Because,
Okay.
right. It's going to save time, and basically that's what we want to do.
Yep. So any questions that the three of us might have, we will get to Mike immediately. Certainly by, we should say end of day Wednesday, so that they have some time to even read our questions.
And Mike, all I ask of you is if one of us raises a red flag, that you report back to the others immediately. But based upon what I know now, I don't think there'll be any red flags. It seems pretty straightforward.
Well,
So we'll have
but
to-
this has
they
been
may have a
very,
couple-
very helpful. Thank you.
Just so you know, they may ask a couple more questions if they think you're selling bonds. These questions are these?
That's fine.
Questions.
We have a
Just go on.
capable team who can answer them.
Okay, good.
We're good. We're not going to answer the questions. We just want to be educated about the answers. So,
Okay, well, I hope that you feel a little bit educated on this. So thanks for having us.
No, thank you. Seriously, this has been very helpful just because, like peripheral, soft general direction answers, but you need to know the actual, what are the rules? What are the processes? What are the effects that it may or may not have on the bond rating and Moody's, yourselves? I mean, so I thank you. No, I feel a lot better having learned.
Yep.
Yeah, yes,
Okay,
and I
good.
feel exactly the same way. I Dave spoke about a fire hose before, but the fire hose is much larger for me since I'm a new member of the Board of Selectmen, and it's been incredibly informative. So thank you very much.
But
Yeah, it's been
Just
great.
before everybody
Okay, good.
leaves, just before everybody leaves, so I understand that in general, right now, the board is okay with doing a bond going forward unless something else comes up. What's not clear to me is how we're gonna structure that, because we need to know that as well for the POS.
May we
So
do the
structure-
15 years just so we have the ultimate flexibility?
Well, it's
Yeah.
not, it's, okay, so we would,
The only thing that falls under the 15 years is the turf field. I mean, everything else has a useful life that easily fits into the turf field is 10 years. You can't get more out of it.
Okay, then I agree. And so therefore the turf field should be at 10 years, but the community center,
Yeah, everything else 15, the
salt shed,
culverts,
Willow
right.
Street and fire engine, those are all 20-year useful lives or longer.
I would go with 15.
Oh, the bond should be 15.
Right,
But
right.
I'm just saying that we have,
All right, so let's do the turf field at 10 and the others at 15.
and this may not matter, but for the turf fields, the modeling we've been doing on how we're gonna repay the turf fields is out of free cash. So we're either drawing down the free cash over, well, we were drawing it down over 5 years. That's what our modeling is. But that's part of our free cash plan to align our free cash with the policy that's in place.
So we should do that. So then based upon that, we're still gonna bond it. We're just gonna
We're gonna
pay it.
bond it, we're just gonna pay the debt service
Yep,
over, and that's what we need to know, is how many years are we gonna pay the debt service for the turf field?
10,
the useful life of a turf field is 10 years.
right.
We know that because we're replacing it and it's 12 years old and it's had it.
Got it.
So are you telling us, Abby, did you catch what the change is? It's just a turf field, 10
Just a
years.
turf field at 10 years, everything else at 15?
Yep,
Okay,
And then Cinder, just to your point, so the call on Thursday, it'll accomplish everything we need. We won't need a second one. to your
correct.
point.
We're gonna try to make it one call.
Great.
and you're gonna give them the heads up, right, Cinder?
Yep.
Excellent.
Yep.
All right.
And
Again,
we'll give them the draft of the bond prospectus that we're sending you of say,
okay.
see it. Ask any other questions they may have.
So hopefully the Fed won't make fools out of us, but you can never time the market.
Robin,
I don't know
so
about
they
that.
lower them by 25 basis points.
Whoop-de-doo.
Really?
That's
I mean, come
already
on.
assumed. Well, it's not necessarily assumed right in July when
But we could look like heroes too.
We
Because
could,
who
but
knows what the tariffs are gonna be tomorrow.
I am not going to try and play with the unknown of interest rates because no one can. But we also have some very important overriding issues, which is let's get our AAA bond rating back and do so without complications on a
I'm
late 24 audit.
superstitious. That's why I don't want to say AAA. I just want to say a bond rating back.
You are, yeah, I keep making that mistake. You're absolutely right. Our rating back.
Right. I think it's really important.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Well,
So
it's important for another reason. All your outstanding bonds right now are trading with no rating on them.
Yeah,
So that's not good.
it just doesn't look, it looks like there's something really bad going on in the town.
right.
Yeah.
So
It doesn't reflect how strong the town is.
Right.
and how great the town is. So
Just a reminder, it doesn't have to be now, but for the fire truck, if the town is gonna issue with a 15-year term, we will ultimately need, a vote of the board, stating the useful life.
Yes, it's
is-
actually, well, we may need to vote on that. So Robin,
do.
can we vote on that now?
Sure. So
Yeah,
I
that-
make a
your
motion.
second agenda.
What, Mike, can we do that?
Nope, sorry, go ahead. Keep going. You're on it.
So I'd like to make a motion to bond the fire truck that was approved at town meeting in the amount of $1,045,000 over 15 years.
So just before you make that vote, so what we're actually looking for in your packet, item 2, there's 2 specific votes that, again, it's not the bonding, although it's related, it is declaring the useful life.
Okay,
So the
And
useful life is 20, the bond is 15.
right. Well, I
And
would say
again,
the
it's
useful life
precedence.
and bond are both.
Well, it's precedence over a fire truck, over a highway truck, and all the ramifications that may come down the road. Sorry, pun not intended.
I really need to get back to work, so fine,
Okay.
if that makes it better. I am not gonna bicker over this, so. Do you want to
Okay,
read the motions, Mike?
Sure. So I'll need someone to move that the maximum useful life of the rescue pumper truck to be financed with the proceeds of the $990,000 borrowing authorized by the vote of the town passed May 1st, 2023, Article 5, Motion 2, is hereby determined pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 7(1) to be 20 years.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor, I, Robin Hunter.
Dave Haviland.
I Cam Hudson.
And then the second vote is someone needs to move that the maximum useful life of the fire pumper truck to be financed in part with the proceeds of the $55,000 borrowing authorized by the vote of the town passed May 5th, 2025. Article 5, Motion 2, is hereby determined pursuant to Mass General Law, Chapter 44, subsection 7(1) to be 20 years.
So moved.
Second,
All in favor, I, Robin Hunter.
Dave Haviland.
I Cam Hudson.
Thank you.
Great. So those are done, and we're still going with a 15-year term. So everyone's happy.
Yep. I don't know why I didn't find, why I got all the information, but not the package. All right, whatever.
It's there somewhere.
I'm sure it's there.
It is there.
Good. Well, again, to Hilltop, I would just like to give my personal thanks, and for that of the town. This has been very educational, and you're allowing us to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
well, thanks
Thank
for
you.
having. Yeah. Okay. Well, have a nice afternoon. We'll talk to you on Thursday.
Thank you.
Unless you want to talk to us sooner. Okay.
No, you'll
Bye-bye.
talk to the team, not us.
That's right.
Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks. Bye.
It will be much
you.
more pleasant. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Okay. Talk to you later, everybody.
Thanks, Cinder.
Thank you.
Fine, thank you.